Welcome to the Navigating Cancer Together podcast. My name is Talea Dindy. I'm an 11-year cancer thriver, cancer doula, and owner of On the Other Side. I use my experience to help others get on the other side of cancer. Gaps between the guidance, emotional support, and education that are needed and what one receives can be huge. This podcast fills those gaps by sharing stories, resources, and information about all things related to cancer and wellness. I interview guests from all walks of life who are living with cancer, caregivers, and those who are thriving on the other side. Also, I talk with organizations, healthcare professionals, and experts in the health and wellness spaces who offer complementary and integrative care. Join me. We are in this together. Disclaimer: the purpose of this podcast is to educate and to inform. The podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. It is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professionals and is not intended for the use in the diagnosis or treatment of individual conditions. Guests who speak in a podcast express their own opinions, experience, and conclusions. Neither Talea Dindy, Navigating Cancer Together, On the Other Side LC, nor any of its affiliates endorses, supports, or opposes any treatment option or other matter discussed in a podcast. The mention of any product, service, organization, activity, or therapy on a podcast should not be construed as an endorsement. Hello, everyone. This is Talea Dindy from ontheotherside.life, and you're listening to the Navigating Cancer Together podcast, the show that has something for everyone facing cancer. Why? Because everyone is different, with different needs, beliefs, and perspectives. Thank you for joining us for this episode. I encourage you to open your minds and your hearts. Today, our very special guest is Lane Stokes. Lane spent 5 years as an ordained minister before moving toward counseling. Unlike most ministers, he pursued mental health rather than pastoral counseling. He believed it would help him to better understand his clients in whatever type of therapy he would offer. In the past 34 years of private practice as a mental health clinician, marriage and family counselor, he believes that he was correct in the assumption. During the first 32 years, he developed programs to make marriage counseling quicker and thus less expensive. He also wrote a book about it and then turned to other projects of interest. The main interest that Lane has been in helping people understand how their emotions operate and how to control them, to give the person a way to obtain their needs and desires. A big discovery that Lane made is now referred to a counseling condensed course, which he teaches. They can give the participant abilities in 3 to 5 sessions that it has taken others 3 to 5 years to learn. One of these is the course, Let Us Teach You How to Be Married, for married or unmarried couples. Another is How Others Perceive You. It is valuable for many business uses as well. Lane, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you, Lane. It's a pleasure having you. Lane, your wife is a survivor of CCL, which is chronic lymphocytic leukemia, and it could return at any moment. Please share your wife's struggles with CCL and how she's doing today.
She's doing okay today, but you're right, it can come back at any time. That is one of her great concerns. When she was first diagnosed with it, the doctor made her wait 7 years before treatment, and he watched her white blood count. And if he got up to a certain number, he would treat, but it would go up close to the number, come back down, and then go back up and come back down. And she was terrified. She was terrified of the treatment. She didn't know what it was going to be like. Other people that had it, their hair had fallen out, and she wasn't so worried about her hair. I don't know why. She's always fussy about her hair. But in this case, it was like, why can you lose my hair? But what else will happen to me, the foggy brain sort of thing. She did lose her sense of smell and taste, which has been a problem since the treatment. So this went on for 7 years, and she would have these meltdowns where she just could hardly function, and she'd lie on the bed. I'd go sit by the bed and tell her stories of my childhood, and that seemed to calm her down. And then she would get over her meltdown and go on, and then later there would be another one, and we would tell more stories from my childhood. The interesting thing about a lot of these stories she thought were so outlandish, she would say, "You're lying." I said, "No, I'm not lying. These things really happen to me." But she liked hearing them anyhow. But I found with other patients with bad diseases that there's a lot of emotional upset that goes along with them. I started working with emotions. I was a marriage counselor for a good 32 years until I found marriage counseling easier to work with, easier to resolve the problems, wrote a book about it, and then started working with emotions more. And I'm glad, because I've learned so much about emotions to help people with their struggles.
That's very important, Lane, and such great work. Do you find that cancer patients have personal fears and emotional upsets that are not covered in medical data to help prepare them for treatment? And if so, how do you help them, Lane?
I think there are a lot of things that they don't learn in the medical data. Just the one about her not knowing what to expect. She knew to expect her hair might fall out, or she might gain weight or lose weight. But the meltdowns were certainly never told her by anybody.
Yeah.
And we had friends in Sunday school class who were suffering from cancer, different types of cancer. One guy would bloat, noticeably bloat, when he'd come into class, and she didn't want to be one of those. And one of the others was jittery all the time. His body was just jittery. I always thought it because he got up and went back and got coffee every time his cup ran out. I thought it had something to do with the caffeine, but of course one lady's hair fell out and she bought a wig, and her wig looked so much better than her hair did normally that after the treatment she just had her hair shaved and wore the wig.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
she was gorgeous with the wig on, so why mess with a good thing? Right? But the brain fog was something that had been mentioned in medical, but until you experience it, you don't really know what it's like. And just foggy, confusing brain. The thing that it reminds me so much of is trauma and the emotions that are caused by trauma that cause a person to be so confused.
Great point.
And when a woman is attacked, usually for several months, all of her emotions are flaring up at the same time, and they just keep her in a confused state of mind. And I see some of this with cancer victims. They just setting off these emotions all at the same time, and they confused. They call it brain fog, but I call it emotion.
You're right, Lane. There are so many different emotions going on from the moment you get that call and you're told that you have cancer. From that moment on, it's like just a flurry. That's how I describe it, a flurry of emotions, and you're trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah, and I remember when she first got the news, nobody wants to hear the C word.
No.
But it's a horrible thing. And even though the death rates are way down from what they used to be, you still can die from it. But it's not so much the death as it is all the other stuff.
Yeah.
If there were a gas leak in the house, we just die from it because she can't smell gas. And if food is a day or two old, she can't smell it to tell whether it's edible. She can't tell if there's Clorox on the bottle or not. So I'm the chief sniffer.
Okay.
I have to sniff everything. Sniff this Clorox and see if this is Clorox or whether we put water in the bottle. And the other day I did that. I couldn't smell Clorox either.
Uh-oh. Just throw it out.
Oh, Lord.
Thank you, Lane, for sharing some of the things that your wife is facing. Let's shift gears a little bit. How did you discover that emotions worked in couples, and how did it lead to your course, Let's Reshuffle the Cards Life Dealt You? I like that title.
I actually had one of my female patients, a couple, ask me, just point blank, she said, I want you to help me understand what my emotions are doing to me. Nobody had ever asked me that.
That's
before.
a great question.
It is. And I don't know how I actually just, what I started with was, okay, let's go through the emotions. There are 10 root emotions. You tell me what you physically feel, what kind of physical manifestations you have, say, for joy. She felt light and she smiled and she could laugh. Okay. And what about for sadness? A lump in the throat, pressure behind the eyes, fear, a tightness of the chest, tightness of the jaw muscles, a strange feeling in the legs, which I thought was the fight or flight. We went all through the emotions. She didn't know exactly what she felt for some of them, like helplessness, that you're helpless, but what does it feel like in the body? And hopeless and despair, that those are the heavy ones. She didn't know exactly, and guilt. Is that a physical feeling? She couldn't get that one. Shame, she could get the physical feeling of the blushing and the embarrassment and whatever. And so I started this process with a couple every week for a few weeks. I would have them run through each emotion and tell me what they were feeling and then what they thought about with it. And then what they said about themselves, they thought of the feeling, and what kind of beliefs they had about it, and of course what the feelings were. And are there any action that you do that are associated with particular feeling, like the fight or flight? For him, if he felt helpless, he would go into a rage, and that was certainly a physical manifestation. And what people don't understand about hopeless is when you feel helpless, you have a tremendous amount of energy that you can do something about the situation with. If you feel hopeless, you have no energy and you feel trapped and can't get out of it. And with this particular couple, it seemed that everything went to hopeless for both of them. They both felt hopeless every day, and they had a business to run. They had children to raise. Now, I'm telling you, you feel hopeless, you feel tired, you don't want to do anything.
That's right.
And then we discovered that for her, the hopelessness went to despair. And despair is usually where people kill themselves. But for her, it was an eye-opening, awakening type of seeing her future, seeing where she was going, and seeing how to get out of the hopeless. So I was seeing some interesting kinds of things. And so somehow in the process, I sketched out a pattern of which emotion linked to what other. Like for her in the beginning, in the morning, she could feel joy, and then immediately she would feel hopeless. So she skipped the other 8 in between. And how could she do that? So I started sketching on a piece of paper what looked like her links. And then I did the same thing for him. And I began to do it for some of my other clients just for fun, and began to see how their emotions actually work. Like for another lady, she was having problems gaining weight. She loved to eat cookies, and on occasion she would reach for the cookies or a cake or whatever she could get her hands on, but she couldn't understand why. And so I put her through the same paces of asking these questions about her, the way she felt and the way she thought and the way she acted and whatnot. And then I sketched out the links as she told them and looked at the links. Whenever she felt happy, then angry, then sad, she reached for the cookies every time. If she felt happy and then sad, she didn't want to eat anything. Then I started thinking, okay, how does she skip the angry part and just go to the sad part? So we started working with her therapeutically as how to handle her anger. Now, the worst one that I've dealt with so far is a woman who was molested as a child and had all kinds of conflicts growing up. At her age, she is now depressed and hopeless most of the time. Was up until the time that I asked her all the questions over a period of 5 weeks. Just every time I'd come back, I'd ask the same questions about the feeling and the actions and all that. And when I drew it out, it looked like 3 cats chasing their tail.
Oh, wow.
It was like concentric circles in the pattern, and they just went around and there was no way out.
That's how she felt.
Yeah, that's what she was feeling, and that's what the pattern was showing. And the interesting thing about the pattern is I'd never thought of a pattern before. This is a whole new thing for me. And so in drawing the patterns, they change from joy to sadness to fear to whatever. And another one might be starting at anger and going to helpless and hopeless. And then another one with another link and another whole series of different links with no way out. So what I did with the links, I started backtracking the links instead of going in the direction that they go in. I started going backwards. And sure enough, I found that there was a kind of a little sidecar there that if she went to anger and rage, she could get out of her hopelessness. But anger and rage were out of her comfort zone. She was also a very religious woman, and you don't get angry. Don't let the sun set on your anger. It's not good to be angry. But I talked to her about it, and I said, okay, if this is the only way out that we can see, you're going to have to find a reason to get angry about something. And it wasn't long before something came up, and she was able to get angry at one of her kinfolk about something, and she felt better.
She released.
And then she pushed it a little bit and was able to get really angry. I don't know if she ever went into a rage or not, but she would get really angry and would push herself to let it out, and she felt better and better. Now, if she wakes up in the morning feeling sad, which is usually with depression, you feel sad, she will try to get mad at something, or she will watch an action movie. The action part of it helps her. And I've been telling depressed patients for years to exercise more and watch action movies as a way of getting out of it. It worked for her. So this is a whole new thing that I've learned, that the more complicated the case that I get now, if it just keeps going round and round in a circle, I'm going to backtrack.
So this is a great example of how someone can use their patterns to get what they want or need.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going for. And when somebody says they want to take the course, I say, what is it that you want? Is there something that you want that we can focus on? That helps.
Lane, throughout this conversation, you have done a great job of, through your stories and your examples, showing how people actually get stuck and why they stay stuck sometimes, because we don't know these things about patterns. We don't know to pay attention to what our body's doing when we're feeling a certain way. No one taught us these things. So a lot of times we just keep going in circles, like you said. Thank you so much for explaining this in detail. I know it'll help a lot of people. One question that I do have is, how can Let's Reshuffle the Cards That Life Has Dealt You help couples when one or both have been diagnosed with cancer?
Why don't you ask me a hard question? One of your own questions, right? You didn't prompt me for this one.
No, and I'm asking this question, Lane, because a lot of times when someone in a relationship is diagnosed with cancer, it puts a huge strain on the relationship. And not only for the person that has cancer, but the person who doesn't, because they're not able to understand why this person that they've been with is changing, or why they're angry all the time or sad all the time. They just don't get it. And so how can Let's Reshuffle the Cards help in these situations?
Okay, you give me a good clue here. I can certainly go with that. Let's say that the other person took the course and we went through the process. It's 5 weeks course, went through the process of asking fairly simple questions about the emotion, what you think, what you feel, what you do, how you talk about it. They get to see for themselves where their links are. And so they can see if I feel sad for my spouse and the link goes to angry, then they're understanding why it is that they feel angry a lot, because they feel sad all the time and they get angry and they shouldn't get angry. And the spouse doesn't like them being angry and they can't understand what causes it or how to stop it. You look at other links, it could be it goes from sad to angry, it could go to helpless, because we certainly feel helpless.
Absolutely.
With our partner, because we can't stop the cancer. And if it goes to helpless, we see why the person would become even more angry and probably shift into a rage from time to time. However people rate, some men will throw a chair across the room, some of them will punch a hole in the wall with their fists, some of them will storm out, go for a drive for an hour or two. She doesn't need him storming out and going away for an hour or two. She needs him here now, and she doesn't want the anger. So we get to trace what links to what, and then how we can bring it back around to not joy, but something akin to joy. The 10 root emotions are mostly negative. In our life, we can do positive thinking, which certainly would be associated with joy. But so much of the other thought that we have in the world is negative. You get your car, and if it doesn't crank, that's a negative thought.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you go out on the street, you have to stop for somebody that, is almost running over you. That's a negative thought. If you see a cop on the side of the road, it's, he's got that radar. That's another negative thought. Mm-hmm. We have so many negative thoughts, and we have no way of controlling those. So if through the links we can find out how to get from helplessness, even if we could get to hopelessness, that would shut him up, because he'd all of a sudden he'd have no energy.
Great point. Yes.
And he could feel trapped like people do, but at least he wouldn't have the energy. And like this other woman, could be that if we could get him into despair, then he could see his way out of that. A lot of it is all about how to get out of.
That's true. Yeah, quickly.
I think anxiety is the one that everybody feels, especially because of COVID. Our political atmosphere is causing a lot of anxiety. We don't even think about it. Anxiety is not a root emotion. Anxiety, the root emotion for that is fear. It's easy to make somebody feel afraid.
Yeah. Lane, you're doing a great job really explaining how all of this works. One thing that I've noticed over the years is, and you touched on this a little bit, men really don't ask for help.
Oh, no.
And why is that, Lane? Based on what you've seen and all the amazing work that you're doing, Lane, when men come to you, first of all, do you happen to know at what point they get to when they finally say, hey, let me reach out and get help from Lane?
Most of them will come to marriage counseling because they don't want to divorce. And most couples won't go to any kind of counseling until it becomes critical. And as a marriage counselor, I think of all of the couples I know that are miserable. But what they say is, everybody has trouble. I'm sure my trouble is no worse than anybody else's. Of course, we don't speak to each other for a week, but we still have a happy marriage. Or he shoves me occasionally, or hits me, but we still have a happy marriage. And one of our children is in detention, juvenile detention for violence, but we have a happy marriage. That's crazy. But women are usually the ones who will ask for help. Men, we're raised differently. We're raised to be, as far as boundaries, we build strong boundaries around ourselves like a box. And certain feelings we can't express, like big boys don't cry.
Right.
So we can't cry. That's what sissies do. We can't feel helpless because that's not manly. We can't feel fear. Oh, I'm not afraid of anything because I'm a real man. All of our feelings go to anger. And we're real good at anger, which I get out on the football field. For instance, fighting or talking back to our parents or whatever, but we don't need help. And of course, in America, we've been taught that we can handle all of our problems by ourselves. We men feel like we don't need help. Women need help because they're weak, which is, to me, women are superior to man in every respect except brute force. We're the ones who carry the heavy load. Women are smart. They don't do that. They'd hire another man to do that. But as far as anything else, women are far superior. Always have been. And if you look at the Bible, you see the proof of it. It's all man stuff. If a woman touches a man in the wrong place, she gets stoned to death. Women are considered to be less value than a dog. If she burns the biscuits, you can divorce her. And if you divorce her and she doesn't have a husband, about the only way she can make a living is become a prostitute. That's a hard life. And if she has sex before she's married, then her father is going to get less money for her marriage, and therefore you better not fool around. But it's all about men, and anything that a woman does is punishable. It's not fair. But we are supposed to be the strong people, and therefore we don't talk about feelings, because the only feelings we have is I feel good, I feel bad, I feel angry. I don't ever feel helpless or sad, afraid, or any of that. And so why should I ask for help? I don't feel any of those things.
Great point. Thank you so much, Lane, for sharing that with us, because a lot of times I know that men need help too. And I hate to see men suffer in silence when there's different people like yourself, different organizations, programs that can help them through whatever it is that they're going through. But unfortunately, a lot of them are simply not getting the help because I don't think they know how to voice that. And based on what you've shared, it's just something you don't do if you're quote unquote a man. You just don't do that.
I had a man come to me a couple of years ago, said he wanted to see me. I'd seen his wife, I think. He wanted to see me separately. And he came in and he related something that he felt guilty about for the last 20 years.
Oh, wow. Long time.
I basically told him that wasn't a big problem. I said, you should feel guilty about. And I guess in a sense, he felt forgiveness and his eyes lit up and he left and he went back to his business and he's been happy ever since, as far as I can tell. Just that one little thing, if he just finds somebody to confide in, he wouldn't suffer for 20 years.
Great example. Thank you so much for sharing that and creating that space for him to do that. It's so important. Lane, there was a study done in 2009, and that study found that men are more likely to leave and that separation and divorce are more common when the wife is the patient. Why do you think that is?
There is a group of men, a group of people called narcissists. We figure it's about 12% of the population.
That's it?
Yeah, I know it seems like more, doesn't it? The rest of those guys are just selfish. But narcissists are not selfish. Narcissists are entitled. There's a difference. They're entitled to everything. They're entitled to make a lot of money, acquire a lot of things. Usually when they get married, it's because they buy their wife and then they buy their children. And as long as the wife is willing to enjoy the luxuries that money can buy, everything's fine. If she ever gets to the place where she wants to be loved, then that's the problem. And that's when she will leave. But the narcissist problem is huge because you're great at making money, you're great at acquiring things, but your ability to have a love relationship is practically none. And I've had narcissists work with them and they get to a point where they just quit because they're not willing to give up anything. They expect everything to revolve around them. It's just the fact of life. And most of the narcissistic men I've worked with have been divorced 3, 4, 5 times. Wow. They just keep trying. They keep trying for the love relationship, but when you get right down to it, and they have to start noticing when they deflect, when they turn the conversation around on her, when they turn the blame around on her. I wrote an article on a website just the other day, and I was talking about people who have to be right all the time.
Yes.
Now, this is true for narcissists. They have to be right all the time. If they are Southern Baptist men, they have to be right all the time because they adhere to the Bible that says the man is the head of the household. That means he gets control. He's always right. Even when he's wrong, he's always right. Most Southern women have learned to tell him he's the head of the household, and then she goes on and makes all the decisions. Anyhow, I keep that on your hat in case there's any Southern Baptists listen to this. But if I have to be right, then you have to be wrong. And how do you feel when you feel wrong? You feel good, no? And for those that continue to make the other person wrong, their relationships don't go well.
Yeah, great explanation. I just love how you explain things. You make it crystal clear. What are some other courses you teach that my audience might find helpful?
One that has come out of the marriage thing that I teach that is very expensive and people have to have some money to do it. But let's see, I think it's only $4,000, but that's not terrible. Let me teach you how to be married.
Oh, interesting.
22 weeks. I teach them everything they need to know about being married, how to listen to each other, how to hear, which is extremely hard for people. Even a lot of therapists don't know how to do it. They just pretend that they do. How to appreciate the other person every day and how to have great sex. Of course, everybody's supposed to know that. When you fall in love, that's an easy one. But when the love would wear off, then that begins to fail. And sex is a very important part of the marriage. It's the only physical expression. And when that dies, the marriage is pretty well done. I'll work with them on that. Teach them how to have a growing intimacy. People think intimacy is the same thing as sexual intimacy. No, it's not. Intimacy is basically risking talking about things you don't want to talk about. And in marriage, there can be a lot of those.
Yeah.
And instead of risking talking about them, we just choke them down and don't do it. In the beginning of a marriage, for instance, there are a lot of things a woman would like to say to the husband, but is afraid that she might embarrass him or worse still, make him angry and start a fight. And she doesn't want to do that, so she just buries it. And when folks come with bad marriages, I ask them about that. Were there times in the beginning of your marriage and all along when you've had something you needed to say, but you didn't say it? Oh, yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, lots of those. So what'd you do? You swept them under the carpet. And now if you look at your carpet, there's a great big hump, and they're coming out now to haunt you. And more of them are coming out than you can handle. And that's why you're giving me a call. You can't handle it. Work with me and we'll handle every one of them, which we do. But see, couples, we don't grow up learning how to talk.
That's true. So true.
We don't listen to each other. When you're talking, I'm not listening. I'm just thinking about what I'm going to say as a comeback. A lot of things we say can start arguments, and arguments, of course, don't go anywhere except into fights, and fights are ugly, and you say things that you can't take back. So what I do in this course is I teach them from the ground up how to be married. And for married people who are having trouble, this is a great course. They get to learn the things they never got to learn before.
Lane, as you're talking about this course, one thing just came to my mind. I'm listening, but this came to my mind, and it sounds like it has to be for people who are ready to change. Because you're talking about something that people have been doing for many years, let's say 20, 30, 40 years, if they're adults coming to you, of course, married. That's a lot of time, a lot of learned behavior that they have to undo. So it sounds like it's something that people have to be willing and ready to make those changes, to do the work, to have an open mind.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's based on what kind of marriage the person had. Is it worth fighting for?
Yes.
And the new series that I've started now on Facebook, LinkedIn, and my websites is that people don't go to counseling because they don't know what's possible in marriage. And then I go through the things that make up a good marriage. Are you always happy to see the other person? And I give this assessment, and people will mark on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the best. They will mark 0. They don't like seeing the person when they come in or when they're in the house. Now, how can you live with somebody and be happy when you don't even want to see them?
Goodness.
No. Are you building, is your life a growing intimacy? Are you talking about things? There's one couple I saw, and I asked him, how often do you and your wife talk about things? Before you came along, we never talked about anything. They've been married 12 years.
Wow.
Never, ever. They talk about the children. They talk about work. They talk about what they were going to eat that night. Or maybe she spent too much money And he'll talk about that, but loving things, caring things. Honey, I'm 30 years old now and I've got a few wrinkles. I'm afraid I'm losing my allure. Do you not love me anymore because I don't look like I used to? That's a critical question, but women won't ask their husbands that because they're afraid.
That's right.
The answer they're going to get. And then when it gets around menopause time for her and him, men do have menopause, they can't talk about that. Even in the beginning of the marriage, when the love chemicals wear off, and neither one of them has the courage to initiate for sex. That's after the first 6 months.
Wow.
That's when sex starts going, away. And a lot of couples come to me, they haven't had sex in years. But the phenomenal thing about it, and how can I say it without bragging on myself, saying I must do something. Usually when a couple comes to me and we spend an hour in consultation and then we start the actual counseling, a lot of time they go home and have sex and they haven't had sex in 5 years. And I know what it is. They feel the hope.
Ah, yes. Of what's possible.
Yeah, of what's possible. And so this series is going to be running through things that make a good marriage. Do you have this in your marriage? No, I don't. The way to get it is to go to counseling because they can't do it by themselves. I'm telling you, you're not going to sit down with your husband and try to talk about something that's so difficult, like the affair that you had last year that you didn't mention to him. You're not going to do that, but you go to a counselor who knows how to help you talk. You learn how to talk about things like that. And I've talked with lots of couples about the affairs they've had. Both of them, and they work through that. They learn to talk to each other. That's a skill.
And it's critical. It's a critical skill just in life, period.
We go into marriage with the same personalities we had in high school and college, and we think that's going to be enough to make marriage work. No, it's not. And a lot of the talk that we did in high school and college was manipulation of people to get what we want, and then we try to manipulate our husband or wife.
Creates resentment.
Especially a woman, she's got an intuition that'll pick up on it 2 weeks before you say it.
Yes. That's true. Yeah.
Of course, it's wonderful. And for people who have never been married, who are thinking about getting married, it's a great investment. They learn things because I say to folks, these are eight skills that none of us learned growing up. If you had learned them growing up, you wouldn't be coming to me for marriage counseling. You'd have a great marriage, but you don't know the skills.
I like how you just said, even if you're thinking about getting married, this course is for you, because we don't know what we're walking into. We don't know how to handle it. And if we haven't seen a successful marriage in our own families, we definitely don't know what it looks like and how it's done. What I'm thinking is it would be a good course to take before you get married, because not only is it helping you prepare for marriage, but also you'll be equipped before real life happens like cancer, and you'll be able to show up for your spouse when those things happen.
Yeah. One thing that couples don't know going to happen to them when they get married is your personality changes. Right after you tie the knot, both your personalities change. If you've never been married before. And what happens is you wake up on the day after the reception or the honeymoon or whatever, and you say, oh my God, I'm married. Now what do I do? And so you pick a role model. Subconsciously, unconsciously, you pick a role model. I went through this, my first marriage. We didn't know what was happening to us for 8 months until we went to a therapist who could help us out. I became my obnoxious, loud father. She became her mousy little mother. So here I was, an ordained minister who was marrying a woman who was the executive secretary for the CEO of a big company. She was very decisive, very strong. And so after we got married, she couldn't decide what placemats to use or cook for supper, or she would be driving around out there somewhere and run out of gas and call me up and say, could you bring me a can of gas? Oh. Totally helpless. And I was my father, who was loud and obnoxious, and that was not who she married. So for us, for 8 months, and for everybody else that didn't go to therapists like this, The first year of marriage is I'm married to somebody I don't know. And that's one reason so many, like 25% of marriages in the first 6 months to a year. That's a big cause of it. So if they can learn these things, these scores teaches, they won't ever have that problem.
Lane, you have shared so much very helpful information and insight with the audience. Please tell them where they can go to learn more about you, the courses that you offer. Please provide your website address.
Okay, the main website is counselingservicesatlanta.com. My direct email address is lanestokes18@yahoo.com. It's LANESTOKES18@yahoo.com.
Okay.
And I invite people, just email me and ask me what you want to. If you want to consider counseling, we'll do 40 or 50 minutes face-to-face on Zoom. And they get to know me better. I get to know them. We get to decide we're a good fit. No obligation. Just find out something for yourself.
Thank you, Lane. I will include that information in the listen notes for anyone who is interested. Lane, I just want to thank you again so much for your time, all of the insight that you have shared with us. And I think it's so important that people really listen to this conversation, whether they're single, married, and especially if you are the spouse of someone who has cancer, because Lane has outlined a lot of great ways to show up for your spouse and to get unstuck if you're feeling stuck. Lane, is there anything else you want to share before we end today?
Just to admonish your audience to realize that as a cancer patient, your emotions are probably going nuts all of the time, and you don't know what they are, and you don't know how to control them. And if you're married to one who has cancer, your emotions are going nuts also. And when the emotions are all firing, if you want to say that, firing at the same time, you get very confused. And it's hard to function when you're confused. So I love this show of yours. I hope you just reach a lot of folks.
Thank you, Lane, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom and helping me to do that. I know that this episode is going to help a lot of people. You have explained things very well. And I hope people, after listening to this, feel comfortable reaching out to you and at least having that initial conversation that could potentially help them move forward. Lane, again, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Before we end today, I would like to give a shout out to the listeners. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please share it with others. Let others know about navigating cancer together. That is it for this Wednesday. And until next time, let's keep navigating cancer together. Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of Navigating Cancer Together. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to subscribe, and if you enjoyed the show, please share or tell your friends and family about it. For notes from the show and previous episodes, visit ontheotherside.life and check out the podcast section. I would love it if you joined us for the next episode. Talk to you soon.